back to Let's Talk About Labor. For those of you who are not familiar with this podcast, the podcast is a collaboration between the University of Tennessee and Gap Connections and aims to help you connect with farmers in Tennessee and other surrounding states, specifically to hear about their experiences using various U.S. temporary foreign visa programs to address their labor needs, as well as general strategies these farmers are using to overcome the labor challenges they are facing. We also try to connect you with individuals from government and nonprofit organizations that could help you better navigate options related to addressing your labor needs. My name is Margarita Velandia, and I'm a professor in the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics at the University of Tennessee.
My name is Jane Chadwell. I'm the Executive Director of Gap Connections, a nonprofit based here in Knoxville, Tennessee that works with farmers across the Southeast on labor issues.
My name is Amy Roachkis. I'm the Training and Resource Coordinator for Gap Connections. Today, we will continue discussing housing requirements for migrant and seasonal workers. We will specifically be talking about housing inspections, and our guest today is Lance Butler. Lance is an expert on this topic, and if you have not listened to the previous episode, I do encourage you to go back and listen to episode 4. Lance works for the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. He oversees 4 programs: the H-2A and H-2B visa program, the Migrant and Seasonal Farm Worker program, and Senior Community Service Employment program. So Lance, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me once again, ladies. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, we learned a lot from you in episode 4, and we want to continue that learning process and have you share your knowledge about housing. And so today's really focus is housing inspection. So I'm going to start off by asking, tell us what a housing occupancy certificate is.
So essentially, an inspection occupancy form is validation that the housing has been inspected and approved according to the regulations. Now, prior to that, Amy, there's a process by which the employer has to follow before getting to the inspection. Would you like me to explain that?
That would be great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So what the employer has to do, and there's a whole timeline involved with this as well. 120 days before the start date of need, the employer has to begin the petitioning process by filing a 790, which is just the contract, essentially indicating to the government, hey, this is what I intend on doing with the workers I'm requesting from you, or for you to grant, access over here. From that, and just for explanation purposes, I won't get into the weeds, but from that, they have to get an AWER. It's the adverse wage effect rate, right? Which is a certain amount that they have to pay the workers, regardless of if the crop goes bad, or they have an act of God, or they're on downtime. Whatever that may be, the AWER is the amount that they have to pay. Then from there, the employer within that 790, that same contract, has to describe the type of work that's going to be done in the field. Now, I'm losing my train of thought. It is worth mentioning that if the farmer has multiple different jobs, they'll have to submit multiple different 790s. For example, if you have farm labor and workers, these individuals normally are the ones that are working in the fields, tilling, harvesting, weeding, packaging. You have to have one 790 for that, right? However, if you have an agricultural equipment operator, you're going to have to submit the same 790 contract. You're just going to have to put in this job description the difference between their work and that work, as well as different job titles and descriptions will have a different AWER rate as well. So any employer that's interested in doing this, if you don't have an agent, you need to be sure that you pay attention to this area, okay? I digress. I'll move on. Now, from that AWER petitioning rate at that time, they have to provide free, affordable, and clean housing for the workers that they're bringing over. At that point, once they submit the 790, me and my staff have to schedule, complete, and process their housing inspection within 32 days of the start date of their contract.
So why does the employer have to have a certificate? What's the importance of having that certificate?
The importance of the certificate, Amy, it's a good question. The importance of their certificate, excuse me, is essentially to show proof of that a state representative has been out on their property, inspected the property, and approved the property. Moreover, when Wage and Hour comes out to audit them, they can then present, hey, we've been inspected, we've been approved, and everything's good to go.
And so that inspection generally happens how far in advance before the workers first arrive?
So that's a good question. It's relative to the employer because some employers are Johnny on the spot, their housing's ready, they want to get it done. Some employers are, procrastinate a little bit and they might, get back to us within 2 weeks of the start date. We have to run out there and get it. However, I would say the vast majority, Amy, they try to get it done between 3 and 4 weeks of the start date of the contract. Now we'll get out there as early as we can. Whenever we, can regulation wise get out there, we're calling and we're scheduling and we're trying to complete that inspection as soon as possible for them.
So how many inspectors do you have on staff or that you work with in Tennessee?
I have 6.
Okay.
Yep,
Regionally located?
I could be a
Okay.
utility.
And they're all regionally located?
Yes, ma'am. We have one so Tennessee is broken down into workforce boards, right? And essentially we have one that covers maybe their area and possibly another workforce board area. So, we have one in Greater Memphis, Northwest Tennessee, the Upper Cumberland area of Tennessee, Southeast, which would be Chattanooga, East and Northeast. And then of course, Thomas, he runs Middle Tennessee, North and South.
Right. Very good. Thanks. I think I'm going to turn it over to Jane.
So we would like for you to walk us through how a housing inspection is conducted. So tell us about how you prepare for a housing inspection, from scheduling one to complete it, and then talk about some of the differences between a house inspection and a hotel inspection if farmers are using a hotel.
Yes, ma'am. So the process that my team and I, what we do is once we receive that 790, we go to the housing location information on the 790. We check it, make sure, what we do is we go back and we cross-reference it from last year to see if it's the same housing inspection. If it is the same housing inspection, at that point, we'll fill out our housing certificate. It's just our form. It's our evidence, I should say. We fill out our certificate with the employer's name, number, email, business address, as well as the physical address of the housing. Okay. From there, what we'll do is we'll call the employer. Hey, this is Mr. Butler. I just want to let you know, I'd like to schedule your housing inspection. All right, great. You want to do it next week? Yes, sir. That's fine. Is the house ready? Is it clean? Is the electricity on? Is the running water? Is trash picked up? So we kind of give that, we try to go over and make sure before we get out there that the farmer is somewhat aware of everything that we're going to look at and to make sure that they're ready, right? So once we get there, fast forward, we're at the location. What we'll do is we'll walk around the exterior of the building first to make sure that if there aren't any gutters, that the water is draining away from the home. There's no pools, because pools can attract all types of pests, and especially mosquitoes. We also make sure that there's no trash up against the home or in the surrounding areas of the property. When we're looking around the outside as well, we make sure that there's screens on windows, because that's a regulation must. They have to have screens. If there are screens, but one of them is damaged, we'll make a note of that on the exterior inspection. From there, we'll go in. Now, really, it's relative to the inspector, how he will perform or she will perform the inspection. I'm just gonna go what I used to do, okay? I would walk in, I would look at the kitchen, go over to the stove, turn on 2 burners, make sure that they're working properly. At the same time, I'm cutting on the cold water and the hot water, making sure that the hot water does indeed get hot, okay? From there, I'm gonna turn off the burners, go to the refrigerator, make sure the refrigerator is working properly. And if they have more than one refrigerator, I will inspect those as well, including any deep freeze that they might have. I'll examine the floor to make sure that whatever the floor covering is, it's smooth, not slippery, and there's no trip hazards. Of course, if there are trip hazards, I'll indicate it in my comment section. From there, I make sure that within the kitchen, if there is a seating area, that the individuals can sit and eat comfortably, right? So if there's, say, five workers, I'm going to make sure that there's at least a table that has 5 seats, but it's also comfortable. They're not, packed in together, right? From there, I will go to the bathrooms, make sure that it is in accordance with the regulations. Also make sure that it does have a window and an exhaust vent. Toilet paper is stocked properly, as well as make sure the heat and cold work in the bathroom too. I'll flush the toilet, make sure the toilet's flushed, make sure it goes down, make sure there's not any leaks there as well. From there, and excuse me, I'll make sure that in each room that I'm visiting, the light's working, okay? From there, I will start inspecting the rooms, make sure that there is a smoke detector in each sleepable room, right? Or habitated room. Make sure that the beds are in accordance with the square foot per man, which if you remember on the last episode, it's 50 square feet per man. The beds are 12 inches off the ground. That if they do have a closet, does the door locked? If there's more than one person in that closet, or excuse me, one more person in that room, does the second individual have an area comparable to the closet to store his items as well? Okay. And that they can be locked or secured, I guess we should say. Now I'll do that in each room that I go to. Okay. From there, I will ask to see the fire extinguisher. I'll ask to see if there is a first aid kit. If there is a first aid kit, Jane, at that point, I will make sure that it's big enough for the capacity of workers that they're requesting, right? Now, I will take it a step further. When it comes to first aid kits, employers who may be listening to this, you do not have to buy a first aid kit. You can put your own first aid kit together. You just have to make sure that it meets the capacity of workers that you have there. There's nothing in the regulations that states you have to have X, Y, Z within a medical kit or a first aid kit, right? Of course, use your common sense, but if you want to put it together, many of our employers put together their own first aid kit. I'll ask to see that, make sure it's in regulations. From there, which I should have gone over this in the kitchen, but when I'm in the kitchen, I'll look underneath the sink. I'll open up the cabinets, right? Let the water run and make sure that there's no drips there as well. I'll ask where the hot water heater is at. I'll go in, make sure the hot water heater is functioning properly, which hopefully by the time I got there, the hot water was running, right? And if it was, then I just do the calculation as far as gallons per square foot of house. So 9 times out of 10, if they have just a regular residential hot water heater, they'll be okay. It's supposed to like administer 32 gallons of heatable water per man within a specified amount of time. I forget that time, but within that amount of time. If everything checks out on my inspection form, I'm writing the dimensions of the room, calculating the square footage, indicating the amount of people that will be in that room for each individual room. I'm indicating how many smoke detectors are in the building, or excuse me, in the home. Also, how many toilets are there, sinks are there, refrigerators there, fire extinguisher, first aid kit. One thing that I didn't touch on that I will now is they have to have, of course, a garbage can within the home. It has to be fly tight as well. Furthermore, on the exterior of the home, It's not mandated, but I would encourage employers to have a second trash can. Okay, it's going to make your life much easier. Also, if you don't want a trash can outside, you can get dumpsters. And we have a lot of employers who use dumpsters and love it because it's right there on site. You know, the workers, all they have to do is walk like 25 feet, dump it, and come back. So I'll indicate this, Jane, on the inspection sheet, at which point I will go over with the employer what I found, if he has any questions. Now, say for an example, that screen that I indicated in the beginning of my explanation was damaged, right? Screen damaged. I'll let the employer know, hey, you have a damaged screen and it needs to be repaired. We want you to repair this in 5 days. And I'll like put an initial and have him initial that we went over it. And then once he's made that repair, we don't go back out there. We trust the employer for what they say is true. They can just send us a picture via, you know, email or text to our work phones, and that suffices at that time. Okay. Now, there's an additional step that I do with the employer in regards to the referral report. Do you want me to go over that with you here?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So within the H-2A program, as you know, bringing an H-2A worker over cannot adversely affect a Tennessean's opportunity to get that same job, right? So what they have to do is they have to post a job order on our agricultural recruitment website at jobsfortn.gov. Once that's posted, anybody in Tennessee that has access to that website can then apply for said job, okay? So if someone applies for said job, we get that information and we create what's called a referral report, okay? Now, these employers, per the regulations and using the visa program, they have to call these individuals, right? They have to, it's a must. And if someone's found continuously not calling referrals, they can be debarred from the H-2A program. So keep that in mind. So say that I find someone, okay? I create the referral report to make sure that the employer is aware of the referrals, right? We present that referral report on site to them, explain what it means to them, what they need to do, and then we have them either initial the referral report that they received it, or on the inspection report that they've received it. Okay. So at that time, I'm going over not only the housing inspection, but the referral report as well, presenting it with them. Any questions? No, Mr. Butler, we don't have any questions. Great. At that point, once he signs, the inspection is complete and approved. At that time, I go back to my office and I upload said inspection referral report into Flag, which is our data gathering platform for the H-2A program, okay? And I complete everything else in that. It's done, it's processed, and they're ready to go.
That's a great explanation. Very, very good job of walking through all of those details. I think that's going to be really helpful to a lot of our listeners. And I want to go back because you use the word debarred, and I want to make sure our listeners really understand what that means. That means that they can no longer use the H-2A program. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you definitely don't want to be on a debarred list for that reason. I have a couple of questions. Does the employer, the person who's in charge of that housing, have to be there for the inspection?
That's a good question. No, the actual person that petitioned for visa status doesn't have to be there. A representative can be there as a liaison in his stead. Now,
Okay.
we prefer the employer there, right?
Yes.
Because any questions that we have, we can articulate it to them, or any repairs on site and nothing's lost in translation. However, that doesn't have, he or she does not have to be present. A general manager can be, a project manager, you know, a farmhand, one of the family members. As long as they have the authority to sign, we're okay with it.
And how about how long, if they're thinking, okay, I'm going to have this housing inspection scheduled, how long should they block off? And I know it depends on how much housing they probably have, but this doesn't sound like this is not a quick 5-minute visit that you guys are making.
Yes, ma'am. If done properly, right, it should be anywhere between 35 to 45 minutes, depending
Okay.
on what is found and, like you said, how big the housing is. Now, if you have multiple homes, like so, we have an employer that has like 25 homes in Tennessee and 50 in Alabama. Like if you're doing 25 homes, it's going to take every bit of 3 to 4 hours to do that paperwork, explanation, referral reports correctly. Um, but I guess that's an extreme circumstance. I would say between 30 and 45 minutes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I know when we tell the farmers we work with, and nobody likes to have somebody come through with the tape measure and go to all this detail,
Right.
but yeah, but I always, we express to them like it's better to find these issues now than to have these issues when the workers are there and you face further fines or violations. So you really want a thorough inspector to go through and tell you what needs to be corrected and to make sure that you're really in compliance. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am. I would.
So, but I know it's always, when we hear farmers going through it, the housing inspections, the beds, the screens on the windows, but much better to find that out now rather than later. Are there any tips or best practices you could share with farmers on how to prepare for a housing inspection? And on the other side of that, is there anything that you would say, don't do this when you're preparing for a housing inspection?
Yes, ma'am. So to any employer that is interested, prepare for your housing inspection as early as possible. So you don't have to wait until the 790 is submitted. You can literally start preparing your house prior to the 790 being submitted. You can call my office and ask us questions. We have resources that we can give to you. Another best practice is call us and ask us for those resources. I have like good PowerPoints of the housing regulations that I can send to you freely that you can then refer back to. And then if something is unclear, don't ever hesitate to ask either your agent or my office questions. Okay. It's when you don't ask questions, in my experience, is where things get lost in translation. And then you're upset at the back end that you have to repair something or it's not approved because of something happened, right? Adversely, what you don't want to do is procrastinate. Don't wait until 2 weeks before your workers get here to have your housing ready. It's only going to frustrate yourself. And if it's during busy season, 9 times out of 10, my team's not going to be able to be out there in 2 weeks. All right. Research, research, research. Don't hesitate and procrastinate to do your research as well. And then don't hesitate to ask questions. Don't hesitate to ask your agent. If you're using an agent, they should be able to give you a lot of information and resources as well. And also call us if you're ever unclear on something. And if I can't find it or my team can't find it, I'll reach out to my federal project officer to get an answer.
No, that's some great advice. And I just want to make sure, if Jane Chadwell calls and has a question about housing, are you guys writing down a note and say, that was Jane Chadwell, I'm going to make sure I visit her operation?
Yes. I'm just playing. No, absolutely not. No, we don't throw shade. I like it's totally unbiased. That's what we're here for, right? If
Yeah, and I
you
think
have an issue, call. Yeah.
And I think that's the wonderful thing about having this podcast. And I know the trainings that you've helped us out with, putting a face with a name, and seeing that you're there to really be a resource and help. You want to be proactive. You don't want to go to the farm and find 20 things wrong. You want to go to the farm and say, hey, this looks really good. And so I think it's really important for our listeners to gain that comfortability of giving you guys a call and asking a question proactively. But certainly, thank you for that great advice that you had and the candor in answering the question.
Yes, ma'am. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Lance, so given the many years of experience you have with housing inspections, we would like to hear what are the most common violations that you have seen.
Okay.
And we not only we want you to discuss those most common violations, but easy ways that they can fix them. Also, maybe, and this is not mandatory, like potential fines or problems they farmers will face if they don't fix those issues or violations, and how long farmers have to fix those violations. You already talked a little bit about that
Yes,
timeline they
ma'am.
have, but if you want to share that with us.
Yeah, no worries, not at all. So, um, I will say this, there really aren't that many violations when we go and inspect, okay? The farmers know the importance of providing safe housing and comfortable housing, right? For their workers. However, if I had to choose some, it would be smoke detectors not working, or the batteries have been pulled out of the back, right? And the farmer doesn't know they're not working. Uncharged fire extinguishers, um, uh, broken window screens, okay, and missing first aid kits, right? And then I would say maybe another one would be cleanliness, you know. So cleanliness is relative to the individual, right? But I've trained my team that if you go into a house and you don't feel like in the present condition you couldn't stay there, then something needs to be done, right? Now, as far as the amount of time to repair said issue or violation, it depends on the violation, right? So if it's a screen, you know, I give them anywhere between 3 and 4 days. All right. 9 times out of 10, Margarita, it's fixed within 24 hours. I'm gonna be honest with you. If it's say smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, and first aid kit, so like a lot of the times we'll go in, hey, where's your first aid kit, fire extinguisher, smoke detectors? Oh, the first aid kit's missing. Oh, I got a new fire extinguisher in my truck. Oh, the first aid kit's at my other house. So before we even finish inspecting, they've already cleared up that, right? Now, if it's something big, and I'll say one house I went and inspected, and there was a hole in the roof, right? Literally a hole in the roof, about the size of a softball, right? So everything else checked out, and I looked up, and there was a little light coming through, and I said, "Hey, man, you got to get that fixed." He was like, "Man, that just happened." I was like, "That's fine, just got to get it fixed, right?" And so I might give him, depending on the start date, so if say this guy's start date was 3 weeks prior, or the inspection was 3 weeks prior to the start date, I gave him all the 3 weeks to get that done, right? And all he had to do was send picture. So the time frame, Margarita, is relative to the extent that the repair needs to be made. um, let's see here. So when it comes to farmers' fines, I can't I can't tell you exactly how much the fine would be, because the Department of Labor, we don't issue fines. Okay, that's a separate issue with wage and hour. However, I can go over some of the items that I have been told fines did occur. One of them was not calling the referrals on the referral sheet. All right. Another one was the car that was being drove to town's insurance wasn't updated. Okay. Another one, oh, was inadequate drainage in the basement. So essentially what that boiled down to is a sump pump had stopped working, right? Those are some violations that I know that have received fines. It's because, from what I understand, the employer neglected to repair it within the time frame that wage and hour asked them to repair it. So they do take these seriously, everyone. However, once you get your house up and running, when I say up and running, situated and ready, right? The following year, it gets easier because you already know what to expect, right? And we've already built that relationship. You're not as nervous. We're not as nervous. So, and then each year it progressively gets easier as well. So if you just follow the regulations, you know, and ask questions and don't procrastinate, y'all will be good.
Well, that makes sense. I will be nervous for you to come to my house today. I don't know if I will be up to regulations. Let me tell you that. I'm gonna have to go back to my house and check.
Well, and I want to ask one question following this
Yes.
because, you know, all right, so I have H-2A housing, I get this inspection, and then I think that's it. I'm done, everything passed. I don't have to do anything else for the rest of the season. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am, pretty much. So, however, okay, so it is true, right? Because we won't come back out and inspect. One, we don't have to, and two, we wouldn't have the time just from the sheer amount of inspections we're doing, right? However, we do encourage, and I would encourage your demographic to go back there at least monthly, right? Because you know, a lot of the farmers, they don't, and then they depend on them to clean up, pick up, and they don't go visit it, which when it comes next year and they need to start preparing, it's harder on them to start preparing. I would also recommend that you do have like meetings with your workers at the house on what your expectations are as well. We do have some farmers, Jan, that will put up in English and Spanish rules of the house, right? Whatever that may be for them. I would recommend that as well.
That's great, Lance. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was going to follow up. Two great examples of best management practices, walking through housing and being in the housing on a regular basis and having your expectations and your rules for the house and making sure that those workers that are living there understand those rules.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think sometimes, you know, it's a contract both ways, and those workers are agreeing to work on that farm as long as that employer is agreeing to supply what was in that contract, which is the inspected housing. And at any point, a worker could make a complaint. You know, if there's a hole in the wall and it doesn't get fixed, and they make a phone call, that could cause you guys to come back out there and say, hey, what happened here, and do that investigation or inspection to make sure it gets fixed, right?
Yes, that's a wonderful point. Yes, ma'am. And not only that, but you could get a surprise visit by wage and hour. And if you don't know what's going on in that house, you're still responsible for whatever violation they see, you know?
I think that's a great point. And so kind of as we get close here, Lance, to wrapping up, describe probably some of the best housing you've seen, just some of the things that the employers, the growers that provide housing do, maybe some things that they do above and beyond to offer some comforts for the workers that are living in that housing.
Nice. So there was this one, I would say it was about 3 years ago. It was a new employer, and to make sure that, you know, he met the requirements of the housing, right? He built a totally new building. Now, this building, it was barracks, right? But he made sure that like their seating area was sectioned off from the eating area. And then within the eating area, they had TVs above the table. In the sitting area, they had 2 or 3 TVs with game consoles for them to relax with. This employer also provided like, I think it was 4 refrigerators for them to put as much food as they wanted to. He also provided, which they have to, but the car he provided was a big pickup truck. It was like I think at that time it was a 2018 brand new pickup truck for them to drive to and from Walmart or wherever the grocery store is. Not only that, he provided fishing poles for them because he put the barracks next to his pond, right?
Nice.
So they could go and relax out there. And then he also put, I'm pretty sure, I don't want to lie to you, but I'm pretty sure, because I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure he put 2 or 3 picnic tables out there for them to sit and relax. That would probably be one of the best ones that really sticks up in mind. There are others, but really not to that extreme, you know. I wish, if I had the presence of mind, and I apologize, ladies, I could have asked for Thomas to send me some of his ideas. Thomas is my inspector in Middle Tennessee, and he's always coming and telling me, "You will not believe what I saw over here." He said, "I would prefer to live in that house than my house." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" They're like, "Yes, Lance. This employer went all out." So I wish I would have got some of those testimonials.
Well, maybe Thomas is a person that we can bring on for a future
You know
podcast.
what? That's a wonderful idea.
I know I
Well,
got to visit a farm last summer, and they set up a chicken coop. The farmer set up a chicken coop for the workers because they wanted eggs.
They
And
wanted good for
so
him.
they had a whole bunch of laying hens. And then I said, "Well, who takes care of the chickens when the workers go home?" And he says, "Oh no, they eat them before they go home." So it is great to hear those good stories
It
of
is.
farmers that really embrace their workers and make them part of their families.
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, and that's what I was going to say, Amy, is it's so nice. Oftentimes the only thing we hear are the bad headlines that get in the news. And really there's a lot of great housing out there and a lot of people who take it very seriously to make sure that those workers are safe and comfortable and they have somewhere to rest after a hard day of work. So always wonderful to share those stories.
I agree.
Lance, this has been a wonderful conversation, very positive conversation, as Jane is telling you. We really appreciate the time you have taken with us to really, and this is just to benefit farmers who are thinking about using the H-2A program, as well as farmers who actually are currently using the H-2A program. So we really appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. You're most welcome. I appreciate you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
for
Lance.
joining us.